All right, welcome back to Calgary Barbell, everybody. We're here wrapping up another week of training on the way to Westerns. And from there, hopefully, to IPF Worlds. We're coming up on we gotta be getting close to the end of this block of training. It's been very productive training. I've been very happy with how well I've been able to progress. Given that I started this block, this is the first sort of exposure to real lower body training stimulus. You know, I'm getting back into doing some high bar squats. We've been able to scale the weight up quite a bit throughout this block, starting with, I think it was around 100 kilos, getting up now to just over 200 kilos this week. With the conventional deadlifts, we scaled those again from, I think, like one plate, maybe 60, 70 kilos, something like that, to also being just at 200 kilos, I think, this week. So seeing that really big progress there, and really only having maybe one instance of my knee kind of pushing back and saying, hey, we're rushing things a bit much, has been really encouraging. I think the couple of times that I've had to sort of rehab and bring myself back up from much, much lower weights, getting back up to that 200 kilo mark kind of starts to make things feel like training again. And it seems to be that from that point, it's much quicker to accelerate into real training again. So yeah, I mean, that's been a really big sort of point of growth this block, being able to get back to actually training. Next block, we'll be back to doing, you know, the competition movements the way that I normally do them, which is the low bar squat and sumo deadlifts. And speaking of sumo deadlifts, I think that we've kind of gotten to a pretty interesting turning point with the deadlift. I feel like in the past week or two, and maybe I mentioned this briefly last check-in, but I feel like I've actually kind of unlocked my old sumo deadlift technique, the technique that got me to a 400 kilo pull. I think shortly after that, a lot of things changed. I think I had a really, really successful training block raw right after that 400 kilo pull. So I pulled 400 in equipment, and then I think worked up to maybe about a 380, 370 kilo double in my condo basement during the lockdowns. And after that super successful, very strong block of training, my body kind of imploded again. And I had a really big, really crappy, long stint of bad training that felt terrible. My hip hurt a lot, and, you know, kind of climbed back up out of that, got back to the point where my knee was acting up. But throughout all of that, I think that my sumo deadlift changed quite a bit. And I think it evolved into something that was much hips higher and a lot less quad. Now, the reason for that, I think, is because the more I pulled myself in when my hip was bothering me, the more it bothered my hip, the more it would hurt off the floor in my hip. It was one of the reasons that Equipped was so good for me, because for whatever reason, it kind of pulled things tight and I could really sit down and get into that nice upright position. Getting back to raw lifting, you know, I wasn't able to do that as well. And then again, that was kind of exacerbated and made more evident, and more hips higher, and even less emphasis on being able to actually pull into position with my knee injury and the knee pain that came along with that. Now, these last couple of weeks, I feel like I've gotten to the point where it doesn't feel quite so foreign, and it certainly doesn't hurt to really pull my hips low and to let my knees track forward. And I think if you look at the deadlifts that I did this week, my pause deadlifts from today actually, you'll see a really, really distinct difference in that versus how I've pulled the last couple of competitions and training cycles leading into the last couple of competitions. That gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope that I can rebuild the deadlift. I haven't had great deadlift performances the last couple of competitions. You know, my world record deadlift was taken by another lifter, earned by another lifter. I'm not trying to throw any shade or anything. But I want to get back to that point. I want to be in contention for it again. I want to be able to count on my deadlift as an ace in the hole in competition so that I can pull myself onto the podium, so that I can jostle for position. And that hasn't really been available to me. So I think that's coming along. That's really exciting. And I think one of the big things that goes along with, you know, obviously just trying to avoid pain by changing my technique was the fact that I've now finally filled out the weight class. I've gotten to the point where I am a pretty solid 120 to 121 most days, and have held my weight there now for a number of months. Whereas before, I think I flirted a lot more with like the 115, 116 kilo range, and would have short stints where I'd kind of get up to around 120, but never was able to stay there. And now being able to kind of stay at that weight for a while, I think I've been able to sort of reframe things and rethink about things. And, you know, obviously having to dial things back quite a bit because of the injury has allowed me the freedom to play around with some pretty different techniques and maybe more extreme, you know, angles and trying to capitalize on leverage and stuff. Anyways, I'm very excited about the deadlift. I think it's in a really good spot. The word of the day is cadre. Anyways, that's the word of the day. And the question of the day, Dylan, is?
The question of the day comes from, it might be George or it's Jorge Villarreal 502.
Oh, yeah. I recognize that name.
He says, Eldritch, that's it, no fitting it in. That's from last week.
Fair.
What's the biggest issue you have found being a 120? Would you go back to 105, 93, Omega cut and battle 83 Manders? I will probably never be 83 again in my life. Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, the toughest part about being a 120, I think for me has been the decline of cardiovascular capabilities. And that was realized through basically falling off with being able to hike. That was something that I loved to do. It was time that I got to spend with my wife doing something that wasn't, you know, watching TV at the end of a day where we're both burnt out or whatever. You know, it was going for an adventure. It was going to do something. And once I filled out the 120s more, hiking became very, very challenging. Now, had I stuck with it, I think I would have been able to come through the other side and get to the point where, you know, I could still hike as a 120. I think, you know, the failing was probably in my own sort of willingness to work through all that discomfort. However, I didn't, you know, I fell off, and now my ability to do that kind of stuff has regressed further. I have kind of over the last couple of months brought back a little bit more of that. I come in every morning, I walk on the treadmill, and I'm starting to get higher and higher pace on the treadmill walk and walking for a little bit longer and longer, trying to rebuild some of that cardiovascular capacity so that, you know, in the future when I do decide to cut down, which there we go, we're getting into the second part of the question, that I have that capability or that I can rebuild it a little easier. Now, the second part of the question is, you know, where will I end up if I do ever cut? And full disclosure, I mean, I think I've been pretty transparent about this. I'm thinking that if I can make this a successful run at Worlds for 2024 in Lithuania, that I will likely go into a period of cutting after that, and that will be sort of my last Worlds as a 120, at least for the foreseeable future. As far as where I'll cut to or how far I'll cut, I'm kind of not 100% sure. I think I will probably settle in around 106 to 108. As far as remembering back, that was a time where I felt like I had all of the things. You know what I mean? I felt like I was lean enough that I felt pretty good about my body composition. I felt like I had the sort of athletic capabilities to kind of do and participate in whatever came up. And I feel like that's, you know, something I've lost as a 120. My brother, for example, wants to do some, you know, like beer league soccer. I would love to do that. I played soccer, or football, as it's properly called, for many, many years. And played it competitively, and it was on the traveling team or whatever. But that's something that's, at this point, especially with a knee injury at 120, is completely out of the question. So I'd like to get back to a point where I could do that kind of stuff. I think that 105 kind of is where I felt good. I think getting back to 105, maybe I'm a little heavier and leaner you know, maybe 110-ish. I'm excited to see what kind of body composition I could get to if I pushed it a little further. So the idea of kind of seeing how lean I can get with the initial cut, you know, I kicked that around in the old noggin. I think it'd be interesting to see, you know, how big I can stay and how lean I can get cutting down from like almost like a bodybuilding perspective. Now that I've been a full 120 for a period of time, I think I've developed and built a lot of muscle over the course of the last, you know, 3 or 4 years. So yeah, I think it could be cool. I think, you know, again, full transparency, you know, being lean and jacked is great for a fitness brand. So, you know, if that provides us some extra value with catching people's eyes and getting more people into the whole Calgary barbell thing, that could be another potential benefit. But at the end of the day, I just kind of want to be where I'm still strong. I don't have any retirement aspirations. I'm not going to quit powerlifting. I'm not going to stop competing. You know, so I would like to still be somewhere where I feel strong and maybe competitive even. You know, I don't know what that's going to look like by the time I cut down, but I think that's something I'd like to keep as a potential, at least. You know, I'm definitely not ready to walk away from the sport. So there's a very long-winded answer to your question. Hopefully that provides you the answers you seek. A lot of questions about music, and I love that, honestly. I think we might end up actually doing a separate video. There's just a whole bunch of different questions about music, and I think if we can find a cool and creative sort of succinct way to do it, we'll just make a music for powerlifters kind of video and put all that stuff in one place, because that's something I'm really excited about and passionate about, something I enjoy a lot. So maybe look forward to that at some point down the road. Until then, make sure to go check out the Calgary Barbell training app. We offer some fantastic services through there. We also offer our coaching. We have nutrition coaching. You know, come to calgarybarbell.com for all your wonderful powerlifting needs, as well as some cool apparel. Yours won't be this sweaty. It'll come packaged and clean, I promise. And that's going to be coming out in just a couple weeks here. So pretty exciting stuff there, but keep your eyes peeled on the socials. We're going to be putting some better photos and proper representations of the merch out right away. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon, fam. Goodbye.